Ancient Rome is remembered as the most powerful empire the world had ever known. Its legions marched across 3 continents, conquering cities and nations with iron discipline and unmatched organization. Yet Rome's greatest strength was not always visible on the battlefield. Hidden beyond the ranks of young soldiers existed a force summoned only in moments of extreme danger. These were not recruits nor ordinary veterans. They were the Evocati, retired masters of war, called back to decide the fate of history. A Roman legionary served a mandatory 25 years. The training was brutal, the discipline unforgiving. Many never survived to see retirement. Those who did were granted land and a pension, a reward earned through sacrifice. Their service was meant to be over. But when Rome faced crisis, it reached beyond duty and obligation, calling back men who had already paid their price in blood. Julius Caesar was the first to understand the true power of veteran experience. In 58 BC, as he began his campaign to conquer Gaul, Caesar found himself facing warrior cultures hardened by generations of conflict. At the Battle of Bibracte, he was outnumbered and under enormous pressure. Realizing that raw numbers were not enough, he summoned retired veterans and invited them to return voluntarily. He offered double pay and the promise of rich spoils. They answered the call. These men were older, many in their 40s and 50s, but they carried over 30 years of battlefield experience. While ordinary legionaries averaged barely 20 years of age, the Evocati had survived everything war could teach. They were not merely fighters. They were instructors, tactical advisors, and natural leaders whose presence reshaped the battlefield. Their value became undeniable at Alesia in 52 BC. Caesar trapped Vercingetorix inside a fortified city while a massive Gallic relief army moved to crush him from the outside. Roman forces, only 50,000 strong, found themselves caught between 2 enemies totaling over 300,000 warriors. Panic threatened to break the lines, but the Evocati held them together. They led the construction of Caesar's double fortification system and maintained discipline when pressure mounted beyond endurance. At the turning point of the battle, as young legionaries faltered, veteran centurions stepped forward, shouting commands and advancing under fire. The Evocati formed a coordinated wedge, smashing through Gallic ranks with precision earned over decades. Rome emerged victorious. Vercingetorix was captured. Gaul was conquered. Caesar rewarded the Evocati with unprecedented honors and double land grants. In 49 BC, Caesar crossed the Rubicon and ignited civil war. Once again, the Evocati answered his call, not for the Senate, but out of personal loyalty. 2,000 of them formed his elite guard. At Pharsalus in 48 BC, Caesar faced Pompey, who commanded nearly twice his numbers. Yet Caesar possessed something Pompey did not: hardened masters of war. When Pompey launched a massive cavalry charge, Caesar unveiled a hidden fourth line composed entirely of Evocati. As Pompey's riders surged forward confidently, the veterans suddenly emerged, hurling javelins directly at their faces. The tactic shattered morale. Cavalrymen broke formation and fled in terror. The exposed flank of Pompey's army collapsed, and the Evocati charged mercilessly, encircling and annihilating the enemy infantry. The outcome was devastating. Pompey lost 15,000 men. Caesar lost only 200. Roman historians later recorded that this victory was not the result of chance, but of superior veteran mastery. Soon after, Caesar became dictator of Rome. His reign ended abruptly with his assassination in 44 BC. The Evocati were furious. The man they had followed through fire and blood was murdered by senators. They swore vengeance. Under Mark Antony and Octavian, they confronted the assassins at Philippi in 42 BC. Leading the final charge, the Evocati shattered Republican forces. Brutus and Cassius took their own lives. The Roman Republic was finished. Civil war did not end there. At Actium in 31 BC, Evocati were tragically divided, some loyal to Antony, others to Octavian. Octavian emerged victorious. Antony, and Cleopatra committed suicide. Egypt fell, and Rome was unified under a single ruler. Octavian became Augustus, the first emperor. Augustus recognized what experience had built. He formalized the Evocati as a permanent elite corps, granting them triple pay, tax exemptions, ceremonial priority, and superior weapons and armor. Admission was ruthless. Only 1 in 100 veterans qualified. Training never ceased. They studied advanced tactics, close-quarters combat, and strategy without rest. Their value was tested again in 9 AD, when Rome suffered catastrophe in the Teutoburg Forest. 3 legions were annihilated by Germanic forces led by Arminius. 15,000 Romans died. Legionary eagles were captured. Augustus was devastated, publicly crying out for his lost legions. Germanicus was sent to avenge the disaster. With him marched 5,000 Evocati. They recovered the lost standards and restored Rome's honor. In 16 AD, at Vizo, the veterans led the charge through dense forests once thought impossible to control. 10,000 Germanic warriors fell. Once again, experience overcame terrain and terror. In 69 AD, Rome endured chaos during the year of the 4 emperors. Evocati fought on opposing sides, veterans killing veterans in a tragic civil war. But at the Second Battle of Bedriacum, those loyal to Vespasian demonstrated overwhelming tactical superiority, crushing Vitellius' forces. Vespasian secured power and rewarded the Evocati with land and lifelong pensions. Rome's empire was not sustained by youth alone. It endured because it understood when to trust experience. The Evocati were the memory of war itself, men who proved that mastery, not numbers, writes history. By the 2nd century after Christ, the Roman Empire stood at the height of its power. The Pax Romana stretched across lands never before united under a single authority. Under Emperor Trajan, Rome reached its greatest territorial extent, and once again, it was veteran mastery, not raw numbers, that led its armies forward. During the Dacian Wars between 101 and 106 AD, the Evocati stood at the forefront of Rome's expansion into the Carpathian Mountains, facing some of the most dangerous warriors Rome had ever encountered. The Dacians fought with the terrifying falx, a massive 2-meter curved blade capable of slicing through standard Roman armor. Early Roman losses proved the threat unmistakable. The Evocati responded not with panic, but adaptation. They reinforced shields, added protective arm guards, and adjusted formations to counter the deadly reach of Dacian weapons. At the Battle of Tapi in 102 AD, victory came at a steep cost, and Evocati casualties were significant. Yet experience prevailed. Dacia fell, and the province was absorbed into the empire. In Rome itself, Trajan's column immortalized the conflict, its reliefs prominently depicting Evocati veterans, a public acknowledgement of their decisive role. Trajan's successor, Emperor Hadrian, shifted focus from conquest to consolidation. He stabilized Rome's borders and ordered the construction of Hadrian's Wall across northern Britannia, a 117-kilometer barrier of stone, forts, and watchtowers. The Evocati oversaw much of its construction, applying generations of fortification knowledge. They trained young legionaries in defensive warfare, passing down hard-won lessons accumulated over decades. Rome's strength continued not through expansion, but through expertise. The 3rd century brought catastrophe. The crisis of the 3rd century saw nearly 50 emperors rise and fall amid constant invasions, economic collapse, and military decay. As institutions failed, the Evocati became something else entirely, de facto guardians of imperial authority, often serving as the disciplined corps protecting emperors whose reigns lasted only months. In 269 AD, during the Battle of Nisus, Gothic armies surged across the Danube frontier. Emperor Claudius II Gothicus faced 50,000 invaders with barely 10,000 Roman troops. Outnumbered 5-1, the Evocati formed the unbreakable center of the Roman line. Barbarian assaults shattered the flanks, but the veterans did not yield a single step. Then came their counterattack, methodical, disciplined, relentless. By nightfall, 30,000 Goths lay dead. Claudius credited the victory openly to the veteran corps. It was one of Rome's last great triumphs before irreversible decline. In 312 AD, at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, the Evocati witnessed something unprecedented. Constantine, challenging Maxentius for control of the empire, claimed a divine vision in Hoc Signo Vinces. For the first time, Christian symbols were painted onto Roman shields, including those carried by veteran Evocati. Constantine prevailed. Maxentius drowned in the Tiber. Christianity rose from persecution to imperial favor. The Evocati, once pagans by tradition, accepted the change pragmatically. Loyalty to the emperor outweighed personal belief. Constantine founded Constantinople as a new imperial capital, and veteran Evocati formed its elite garrison. When the empire formally divided into East and West, they were divided as well. The late 4th century brought escalating barbarian pressure, driven by waves of migration. In 378 AD, disaster struck at Adrianople. The Eastern Roman army was annihilated by the Visigoths. Emperor Valens was killed. 2/3 of the army vanished in a single day. Yet the Evocati who survived did not break. While regular troops collapsed in panic, veteran discipline held. They organized a fighting withdrawal, saving what remained of the army and preventing complete annihilation. Once again, experience preserved Rome when institutions failed. By 406 AD, the Western Empire stood on the brink. Radagaisus invaded Italy with nearly 100,000 warriors. Stilicho, Rome's last great general, fielded a mixed army of Romans and barbarian federates. Within it stood 500 Evocati, the stabilizing core. At Fiesole, the veterans coordinated Roman and allied forces into cohesion. Radagaisus was defeated and executed, but the victory revealed a truth Rome could not escape. It was now dependent on barbarian allies to survive. In 410 AD, the unthinkable happened. Alaric's Visigoths sacked Rome for the first time in 8 centuries. As chaos engulfed the city, just 100 Evocati stood in the Roman Forum. These were the last traditional masters of Roman warfare. They fought to the death. None surrendered. Their fall symbolized the end of a military tradition that had endured for 700 years. The Western Roman Empire collapsed officially in 476 AD. With it, the Evocati vanished. The Eastern Empire endured for another 1,000 years as Byzantium, preserving fragments of Roman tradition. Elite veteran units were created, the Excubitors, the Hetaeria, but none fully matched the Evocati system that Rome had perfected. Their legacy endured beyond empire. The Evocati proved a fundamental truth of warfare. Experience outweighs youth. Veterans are force multipliers. Modern armies still apply the lesson. Elite units like the SAS, Navy SEALs, and Spetsnaz reflect the same principles: ruthless selection, continuous training, and the elevation of experience over raw strength. Modern statistics confirm what Rome learned long ago. A soldier with 5 years of combat mastery is several times more effective than a recruit. The Evocati possessed 10 to 30 years of experience. Their effectiveness was exponential. Psychologically, they remained calm under fire. They recognized patterns, anticipated enemy movements, and made rational decisions within chaos. Panic did not touch them. Placed at the center of the line, they acted as moral anchors. Younger troops drew confidence from their presence. When flanks crumbled, veterans held. They advised commanders openly, unconstrained by fear of punishment. Caesar dined with Evocati centurions, listening to their counsel, unlike arrogant leaders such as Varus, whose disregard for experience led to disaster. The Evocati trained generations of legionaries, passing down practical knowledge through mentorship rather than theory. Their weapons reflected individuality, customized swords, reinforced pila, personalized armor shaped by decades of battle. They were paid triple wages, received double land grants, tax exemptions, and public honor. They were national heroes. Above all, the Evocati embodied Rome's greatest military insight: Wars are not won by numbers alone, but by those who have survived long enough to understand them. They embodied the highest ideals of Rome itself: discipline without hesitation, courage hardened by experience, mastery earned over decades, and absolute loyalty to the Roman state. Classical Roman literature reflects this reverence. Writers such as Tacitus and Pliny the Elder refer to the Evocati with open admiration, treating them not as ordinary soldiers, but as exemplars of Roman virtue. Roman art reinforces this image. Reliefs and sculptures depict Evocati as unmistakable figures on the battlefield, set apart by individualized equipment shaped by years of service. Tomb inscriptions confirm the same truth. Evocati proudly identified themselves in death, listing campaigns fought across decades, a lifetime of wars carved into stone. Archaeology brings these voices back to life. Excavated Evocati tombs reveal extraordinary careers, men who survived dozens of battles across the empire. Modern historians analyze these records closely, studying not just where the Evocati fought, but how and why they succeeded. Military academies today examine the Evocati as a near-perfect historical example of how veteran experience transforms fighting forces. Military documentaries on channels like History and Discovery present them as Rome's most lethal hidden elite. In popular culture, the legacy continues. Strategy games such as Total War, Rome portray Evocati as the most powerful elite units available. Historical novelists like Simon Scarrow place hardened veterans at the center of their stories. Even cinema echoes their presence. Films like Gladiator draw inspiration from the archetype of the seasoned warrior whose strength lies not in youth, but mastery. The concept never vanished. It migrated forward in time. Modern militaries around the world unknowingly apply the Evocati principle. In the United States Armed Forces, senior non-commissioned officers with 20 or 30 years of service function exactly as their Roman counterparts once did. In Israel, experienced reservists are recalled during national crises, echoing the original Evocati model with striking fidelity. The French Foreign Legion relies on veterans with decades of combat experience to form its elite corps. Russian Spetsnaz units value seasoned soldiers well into their 40s and 50s, the same age as Roman Evocati. British SAS selection prizes mastery over brute physical youth. American Navy SEAL teams are anchored by operators with 15 to 20 years of experience. The lineage is unmistakable. Even in controversial modern contexts, the comparison appears. Private military companies rely heavily on veteran operators. Yet here the difference becomes crucial. The Evocati were never mercenaries. They served the Roman state, not private interests. Their motivation was honor, loyalty, and identity, not contracts alone. This distinction matters deeply. Rome thrived because it built a culture that respected, rewarded, and retained its masters. Veteran expertise was not exploited, it was honored. That culture created a virtuous cycle. Young soldiers aspired not merely to survive, but to one day join the ranks of respected veterans. Being an Evocatus was not a burden. It was the highest honor of military life. Rome celebrated its veterans publicly, with triumphal columns, arches, reliefs, and pensions that ensured long-term prosperity. Veterans were not discarded after service. They were integrated into society as pillars of the state. Modern societies often fail here. Too often, accumulated experience is allowed to fade once service ends. Rome understood what many forget: neglecting veterans weakens future armies. During the crisis of the 3rd century, when emperors failed to honor payments and promises, Evocati loyalty frayed. Some supported usurpers. Fragmentation followed. Diocletian later attempted restoration by restabilizing veteran compensation, but by then centuries of tradition were already eroding. The Western Roman Empire ultimately collapsed because it lost its loyal, experienced core and replaced it with short-term barbarian mercenaries. Federated troops fought for pay, not identity. When pressure mounted, they switched sides. Evocati never would have. They had defended Rome to the last breath, as they did in 410 AD, dying to the last man in the forum. The lesson echoes across time. Effective armies require a loyal, experienced core. Loyalty cannot be purchased cheaply. It must be cultivated through respect, reward, and honor. Rome understood this for centuries through the Evocati system. When that lesson was forgotten, the empire collapsed. The lesson remains relevant today. States that invest in veterans build lasting military strength. The United States recognizes this through veteran education and reintegration programs. Israel maintains national defense through experienced reservists. These are modern reflections of an ancient truth. The Evocati represent a universal military ideal: mastery over youth, discipline over chaos, loyalty over convenience. 2,000 years after their disappearance, their lessons still shape modern strategy. They were not simply elite soldiers. They were the embodiment of Rome at its best: experience, honor, and unwavering service. Every time a seasoned sergeant mentors a young recruit, the spirit of the Evocati lives on. Rome did not conquer the world with youth alone. It conquered it with veterans.